I'll never forget the day I knew. You hear about these things, cheating, betrayal, and you think you can see it coming, right? Well, I didn't. Not until it slapped me in the face. It was a Tuesday. Claire had been off for a couple of days with what she said was a business trip, something about an art exhibition in New York. She had this busy aura about her, always juggling phone calls, meetings, events. But that day, I wasn't buying it. I walked into the kitchen, looking for a glass of water, when I heard Claire's voice from the living room. Soft, seductive. That wasn't a business call, and it sure as hell wasn't a friend. I froze. I didn't even know what I was doing at first, but I turned around, peering through the crack in the door. I saw her, my wife, Claire, sitting on the couch, holding her phone, whispering to a man on the other end. Her voice was low, but I could catch enough words to know this wasn't just a harmless conversation. "I miss you too, Richard. I can't wait to see you tonight. It'll be just like before, I promise." I didn't need to hear any more. The reality hit me like a brick in the gut. Richard, a name I'd never heard before. Not until now. But here's the thing. I wasn't some soft guy who'd sit around and cry about it. I wasn't the kind of guy who let things slide, either. My dad taught me one thing when I was growing up. You don't let people walk all over you. Not in business. Not in life. And especially not in your marriage. I stormed out of the room, heart pounding, but I wasn't about to lose my cool. Not yet. No, I needed to think. I needed to know what the hell was really going on. So I grabbed my coat, slammed the door behind me, and went to the office. While I drove, I couldn't stop replaying the scene in my head. Claire wasn't just distracted with business. She was lying, and she was doing it right under my nose. But what bothered me more than the conversation was the tone. It wasn't some one-time slip-up, a flirtation that meant nothing. She was emotionally invested. And that's what hit me hardest. When I finally reached my office, I sat at my desk, still shaking a little. I wasn't sure whether it was anger or adrenaline. But one thing was clear. I wasn't going to let this slide. Now, before you think I'm some paranoid fool or the type who goes through his wife's things, let me set the record straight. I'm a professional. I run a consultancy firm, financials, high-stakes business deals, audits. I've got a sharp eye for detail, and I don't miss much. That's why, when things started feeling off with Claire, I started watching. I wasn't some whiny husband with a gut feeling. No, I was calculating, methodical. But it didn't help that Claire was unpredictable. She was the kind of woman who loved the high life, the art world, and the attention it brought her. She'd always been a bit aloof when it came to her past, but I accepted that. She never told me much about her family, the wealthy, powerful ones. The ones she'd cut off years ago, leaving behind some messy family drama that I only got bits and pieces of. When we met, she was an up-and-coming gallery owner, full of ambition. She had the right connections, and she knew how to play the game. We were good together, on paper. We built a nice life. Me with my successful firm, her with the gallery. Nothing flashy, but comfortable. I thought we were happy. But somewhere along the way, I lost track of something important, my wife. I'm Mike, 49 years old. I've spent the last 2 decades building my career, making a life for myself. Never had to worry about money. Never had to worry about much, really. I've got my family, a nice house, and a wife who seemed to have it all under control. Or at least I thought she did. But the moment I heard that phone call, the moment I knew, everything changed. That's when I knew it wasn't just about me or her anymore. It was about finding out exactly what was going on. Who was this Richard? And more importantly, why was my wife so willing to throw away the life we'd built for him? The thing is, I wasn't going to sit idly by. I wasn't going to talk it out with her like some soft, naive fool. No, I was going to find out the truth, and I wasn't going to be gentle about it. This wasn't just some passing fling or moment of weakness. I knew it was deeper than that. And that's when I decided it wasn't just about catching her in a lie. I was going to destroy everything she'd built. I wasn't sure what to do next. But the one thing I knew for certain, I wasn't just going to sit back and let Claire continue this game. I wasn't about to be the guy who gets taken for a fool. Not after everything I'd built. I spent that night pacing around my house, fuming. All those years, all that trust I'd placed in her, it was a lie. The life we'd built, the one I thought was solid, was crumbling in front of me. And the worst part? It wasn't even about me anymore. It was about her. Claire wasn't who I thought she was. I didn't know what to expect when I confronted her. There was no rule book for something like this. But I wasn't going to be passive about it. No apologies. No pleas for mercy. I was going to put her on the spot, give her one chance to come clean. The next morning, Claire came home early from her trip. She looked at me as soon as she walked through the door, and I could tell she knew something was off. There was a coldness in the air between us. She asked how my day had been, but I wasn't interested in small talk. Claire, I said, cutting through the niceties, I want to know who Richard is. Her face went pale. I could see her body tense. It wasn't the reaction I was expecting. It was the first real crack in her armor. I was right. She tried to play it off. What do you mean? Richard's just a guy I met at the gallery. I could tell she was lying. I wasn't an idiot. The way her voice wavered, the way she avoided eye contact. She wasn't fooling anyone. But I wasn't going to let her off easy. I pushed forward. I don't believe you. I know about the messages, Claire. You think I didn't see them? She opened her mouth, but no words came out. The silence that followed felt heavier than anything I'd ever experienced. I heard you, Claire. On the phone last night. I heard everything. You miss him. You want to see him again. What the hell is going on? I felt my voice rising, but I couldn't stop it. The anger boiled inside me. I wasn't asking for an explanation. I was demanding one. She shifted on her feet, clearly uncomfortable, and that's when I saw the panic in her eyes. But instead of owning up to it, she just doubled down. You don't understand, Mike. It's not what you think. Her voice was defensive now, shaky but still full of excuses. I understand perfectly, I said, stepping closer, my voice low and hard. You've been cheating on me, Claire. Don't sit here and pretend otherwise. I could see the gears turning in her head, trying to come up with a lie that would get her out of this. But I wasn't interested in hearing it anymore. I was done with her excuses. I don't know why you're acting this way, Mike. You've always been so distant, so demanding. You never really cared about me. Her words hit me like a slap. I laughed bitterly. Are you seriously blaming me for this? You've been running around behind my back, and now I'm the one at fault? No, Claire. This is on you. I took a deep breath, trying to hold back my rage. Who the hell is Richard? What's your deal with him? She hesitated for a long moment, then dropped her shoulders, defeated. Her voice softened, but it wasn't an apology. It was more like she was justifying her actions. He's not just some guy. He's someone from my past. Someone I had to keep secret. Someone I thought I could forget about. But when he reached out again, I couldn't stop myself, Mike. I didn't know how to handle it. Forget about him? I barked, feeling the heat rise in my chest. You've been seeing him behind my back, Claire. It's not just a forgotten past. You've been sleeping with him. How long has this been going on? How many times has he been inside our home while I was at work? She recoiled, as if my words physically hurt her. But she didn't answer. She couldn't. I saw it in her eyes. She knew she was caught. I wanted to tell you, but I didn't know how. Her voice had dropped to a whisper now. I didn't know how to explain everything, Mike. My family, my history with Richard, it's complicated. You wouldn't understand. Then make me understand. I snapped, stepping closer, my eyes locked on hers. You've been lying to me, Claire. You've been lying to me for months. And now you expect me to just let it go because it's complicated? No. No more lies. I stood there, waiting for her to admit it, to give me the truth. But instead, she just stared at me, her expression a mixture of guilt and resentment. She opened her mouth to speak again, but I cut her off. Don't give me that. You can't even look me in the eye and tell me the truth. You've been having an affair with him, and I'm done with your excuses. I turned away from her, pacing the living room. I needed to calm down, to think, but my mind was spinning. The betrayal was so much worse than I thought. It wasn't just some fleeting affair. It wasn't just sex. She had been emotionally attached to him, a man I didn't even know, and now everything in my life felt like a lie. You want to explain yourself now? I asked, my back still turned to her. Tell me how you could do this to me after all these years? After everything we built together? Claire's voice shook as she spoke. I didn't mean for it to happen this way. Richard, he's someone from my past. Someone who was always there for me when I needed him. I didn't want to hurt you, Mike. I swear. I laughed again. It wasn't a funny laugh. It was the kind of laugh that comes from years of frustration, from feeling betrayed, from seeing the truth and knowing there's no going back. "You didn't want to hurt me?" I said through gritted teeth. "You've been screwing this guy behind my back for who knows how long. And now you're telling me you didn't want to hurt me?" I turned to face her. Her face was red, eyes glassy, like she might cry. But I didn't care about her tears. I cared about what she had taken from me. "I'm done with this, Claire," I said, my voice steady. "I'm done with you. You've made your choice." And that was it. The moment I'd known would come. The moment I had to make a decision. I didn't sleep that night. The anger, the betrayal, it kept me awake, racing in my mind. Claire had confessed. She'd admitted to sleeping with Richard, to seeking something with him that she'd never had with me. And yet, there she was still trying to pull that soft, broken act like somehow I was supposed to feel sorry for her. I didn't pity her. Not anymore. The next morning, I didn't even wait for her to speak. I couldn't look at her. I couldn't stand the sight of the woman who had torn apart everything we'd built. I didn't want to hear her explanations. I didn't want any more excuses. I had no intention of dragging this out. No intention of giving her the luxury of pretending everything was fine. I grabbed my phone and started making calls. First to my lawyer, then to my accountant. I was going to be smart about this. I wasn't about to let her ruin my life without consequences. She'd thrown everything away for a man who wasn't even worth her time. And now, I was going to make sure she felt the weight of her decision. I wasn't angry just because she cheated. That was one thing. It was the fact that she thought she could do it so easily. The lies, the manipulation, the way she hid everything behind that sweet, charming smile. I'd been blind. I was the fool. She had played me like I was some clueless husband who didn't know what was going on under his own roof. But I wasn't going to let her get away with it. Not without paying a price. It was time for a plan. A real plan. I started by cutting off her access to our finances. Claire had always been the one who handled the bills and investments, but now I was taking over. It wasn't just about the money, though that part felt satisfying, I won't lie. It was about control. I spoke with the bank, locking down accounts, changing passwords, transferring some of our joint funds to a separate account of my own. I had worked hard for everything we had, and if she thought she was going to waltz away from this with everything intact, she had another thing coming. Then I turned my attention to her gallery. Claire had been building her name in the art world for years, and I had always supported it. But now, that was going to change too. I made a call to a business associate of mine who had connections in the art world. I didn't ask for favors. I didn't need them. I simply told him that Claire was having personal issues that might affect her reputation in the industry. I didn't go into details, just enough to plant the seed of doubt. Her gallery wasn't going to be the same after this. People would talk. For the first time in a long time, I felt in control. The power had shifted, and I wasn't going to waste a single second of it. But that was just the beginning. I had bigger plans for Claire. As much as she had hurt me, I was going to make sure she felt the consequences of her actions in ways she would never forget. A few days later, I found myself standing in front of her gallery, waiting for her to arrive. I'd been keeping an eye on her, watching her interactions, taking note of every time she slipped up. But today I had something different planned. I wasn't going to confront her again. No, I had a different way of making her realize just how much she'd messed up. When she finally showed up, her eyes immediately scanned the surroundings, looking for me. She hadn't noticed, yet that I'd already set things in motion. "Mike, what are you doing here?" she asked, her voice fake, almost too sweet. She still had the nerve to act like everything was fine, like we could just move on from this. "I was just stopping by to see how things are going," I said, smiling tightly. "You know, with the gallery and all. Heard there was some drama going around." She blinked, clearly unsettled. "What do you mean? What kind of drama?" I watched her closely as I took a step forward. "You know, it's funny how people start talking when there's uncertainty about a person's personal life. It's always amazing how fast things can spiral, especially when someone's name starts getting dragged through the mud." Claire's face paled. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. I could see the realization dawning on her. "You thought you could keep everything separate, didn't you? Your little affair with Richard, your reputation, your perfect life. But you're wrong. It doesn't work like that." I let the words sink in, enjoying the way she squirmed. "Mike, She stammered, "Please. I didn't mean for it to get this far." "You didn't mean for it to get this far?" I laughed. "No, Claire, you didn't mean for me to find out. But now that I have, it's too late. You wanted Richard, and you got him. But you're not getting away with this." I stood there, letting her marinate in the consequences of her actions. She had underestimated me. That was the real kicker here. She thought I was some passive husband, sitting in the background, waiting for her to walk all over me. She was wrong, and I was going to make sure she understood just how wrong she was. I didn't give her a chance to say anything else. I walked out of the gallery, leaving her there to deal with the fallout. By the time she figured out what I had done, it would be too late. Later that night, I sat in my office, reflecting on everything. The plan was coming together nicely. Claire thought she had all the power, but in reality, she had just given it all away. I wasn't going to just divorce her and walk away. No, that would be too easy. I was going to destroy the life she had built, the life she had cheated for. I spent the next few weeks quietly executing the plan. I made more phone calls, sowed more seeds of doubt, ensured that the gossip about her affair spread like wildfire through the art community. I used everything I had at my disposal, her own connections, her own reputation, to make sure she felt the consequences. I didn't leave any stone unturned. I also made sure to continue shutting her out of our finances. The money she had thought was her security blanket? Gone. Her fancy car, her art deals, the trips. Everything was up in the air now. Claire had wanted a different life with Richard? Fine. Let's see how she does without all the luxuries she had grown so comfortable with. By the time I was done, I had effectively put an end to the world Claire had lived in for the past few years. And it felt good, but the best part was that I wasn't done yet. There was still more to come. By the time I had executed most of my plan, the weight of it all started to sink in. I had done what I set out to do. I'd made Claire feel the full brunt of her betrayal. The calls to the gallery, the whispers in the art world, the freezing of our finances, it was all falling apart around her. But the satisfaction of it didn't come right away. At first, it felt like justice. It felt like the only option I had left. But as the days wore on, I realized something. I wasn't just getting revenge anymore. I was changing. The old Mike, the passive husband, the one who took everything on the chin and tried to fix things, he was gone. And something else had taken his place. Something darker. Something colder. I wasn't sure if I liked it, but I couldn't stop it. As Claire's reputation continued to erode, she started reaching out to me, begging me to talk. At first, I ignored her. There was nothing more to say. I wasn't interested in apologies or explanations. The damage was done, and I wasn't going to fall for her act again. But one afternoon, about 2 weeks into my campaign of retaliation, she showed up at the house unannounced. I was in my office when I heard the doorbell ring. I hadn't expected her to come here. She knew she wasn't welcome, but I guess the desperation was finally too much for her. I didn't answer at first. Instead, I waited and listened. I heard the soft thud of her shoes as she walked to the front door. A hesitant knock followed. Then she spoke. "Mike, I need to talk to you. Please." I stood there for a moment, my mind racing. I wasn't sure what she wanted anymore. What could she possibly say that would make this situation any better? Did she still think she could talk her way out of it? After a long pause, I stood up and made my way to the front door. I opened it slowly, taking in the sight of her. She looked different, disheveled, almost fragile, like someone who had been through a storm and didn't know how to get out. "Mike, please," she started before I could say anything. I'm so sorry for everything." I didn't let her finish. "You're sorry? For what? For lying to me? For ruining everything we had?" My voice was cold, detached. Claire's eyes welled up, but I wasn't moved by her tears. I'd seen them before, and they didn't change anything. "No, Mike, I didn't want it to end this way. Richard, he's not even important. It's not what you think. I made a mistake. A huge mistake, but—" "Stop." I cut her off. "I don't want to hear about Richard. I don't want to hear about your mistakes." I could feel the anger building up again. I didn't trust myself not to lash out. "You've been lying to me for months, Claire. You've been with him, and I've been blind." My voice shook with the weight of it. She stepped forward, her hands trembling as she reached for mine. "Mike, please don't do this. I've lost everything. my reputation, my business. Richard won't even take my calls anymore. You were the only person I trusted, the only one who ever really knew me. I pulled my hand away and took a step back. And you think I owe you something for that? You think you deserve my sympathy after everything? She fell silent, her shoulders sagging in defeat. She knew. There was nothing she could say to fix this now. I did what I had to do, I said, my voice now firm. And it's done. There's no going back from this. You chose him over me, and now you have to live with the consequences. I closed the door before she could say anything else. I didn't want to hear her begging. I had given her enough chances. The reality of her situation was sinking in, and she was starting to realize that I wasn't the same guy I used to be. Later that night, I sat in the living room, thinking about how far I had come. It wasn't just about Claire anymore. It wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming my life. But something still gnawed at me. The question I couldn't shake. Did I want to completely destroy Claire? She had taken so much from me. But there was a part of me that still wasn't sure if I wanted to go that far. What was the end game here? Was it truly satisfaction, or was it something else? As the days went by, I watched as her world continued to collapse. The gallery was no longer receiving the same level of attention. Her art deals dried up. Even her friends started distancing themselves from her. Word of her affairs spread like wildfire, and the damage was irreversible. I had made sure of that, but I still hadn't made a final decision. Should I take the next step? Should I press even harder, completely ruin her, or let her figure it out on her own? The answer came when I received a letter. It wasn't from Claire. It was from a lawyer. The letter was a divorce petition. Claire had made her choice. She wanted out. At first, I didn't know how to feel about it. Was I relieved? Angry? Indifferent? I had been preparing myself for this moment, but I didn't expect it to come in the form of a piece of paper, a final nail in the coffin, the end of it all. I read through the letter carefully, and it was clear that Claire had no intention of giving up easily. She was asking for a hefty settlement. She was asking for half of everything, and she was asking for the house. I put the letter down, staring at the wall for a long time. The decision had been made for me, but now it was time to decide how I would move forward. I wasn't going to let her take everything. The next day, I met with my lawyer again. We went over the divorce terms. I had already made my move with the finances, so this was just a formality. Claire wasn't getting any of it. The house was mine, and so was everything we had built together. As I walked out of the office, a sense of calm washed over me. The betrayal still stung, but it didn't have control over me anymore. I had been through hell, but now I was walking away stronger. I wasn't going to be the guy who just took the high road. I was going to take what was mine. That night, as I sat alone in my house, I thought about the years I had spent with Claire. The good times, the bad times, the lies we'd told each other. But in the end, I realized something important. I wasn't the same person anymore. I had changed. I had taken back control. The final phase of the fallout from Claire's betrayal was a strange mix of numbness and quiet satisfaction. I had expected to feel something more dramatic. Rage, sadness, regret, but what I felt most of all was relief. A deep, settling relief that, at long last, I had taken back control of my life. But at the same time, I knew this was the calm before the storm. It had been a week since Claire had filed for divorce, a week since I had made my final decision to push through with everything. I had executed my revenge. My reputation was intact, and hers was in tatters. The gallery, her pride and joy, was struggling. She had lost friends, colleagues, and had alienated almost everyone who'd ever supported her. I had no pity for her. She had made her bed. But still, I couldn't help but wonder, what now? What came next after the devastation? Was the quiet satisfaction of seeing her crumble all there was? I spent the next few days in solitude, mainly in my office or working on the house. I didn't reach out to anyone, not even my family. The last thing I wanted was to explain myself, to hear about how people thought I was better than that, or that I should have taken the high road. I'd been living the high road for years, and look where it had gotten me. Claire had made her own choices. I was finally sitting in a place of power. Then came the unexpected twist. It was late one night, around 10 p.m., when the phone rang. I had just finished up some paperwork when I saw the name flash across the screen. It was Richard. I hadn't expected to hear from him, Not after everything that had gone down, but there it was, his name staring at me like a dare. I hesitated. Should I ignore it? Should I let him stew in whatever mess he had created with Claire? But my curiosity got the better of me. I picked up the phone. Mike, Richard's voice crackled through the line, sounding tired, frustrated. I think we need to talk. At first, I wasn't sure how to respond. Talk? After everything that had happened, what on earth did he want to discuss? The affair? The damage? The destruction of 2 lives? What could we possibly need to talk about? I asked, my tone flat. I know you've made things difficult for Claire, but… Difficult? I interrupted. You think what I've done to her is difficult? Let's not kid ourselves, Richard. You're both getting exactly what you deserve. There was a silence on the other end, and then he spoke again, quieter this time. I didn't know it would end like this, Mike. I didn't know how deep things were with Claire. And I'm sorry for everything. But the truth is, I don't think you understand the whole situation. It wasn't just about us. Claire, well, she's been hiding something from both of us. There's more to the story. Something bigger. I sat back, my mind racing. Hiding something? What was he talking about? What do you mean, bigger? I asked, more curious than ever. Richard took a deep breath before continuing. I wasn't the first person she was sleeping with. There were others before me. I found out a while ago, and I've been trying to get her to be honest with you. But she's kept up the act, pretending like everything was fine. She was seeing someone else. Someone before me. I was stunned. At first, I didn't know what to say. My mind spun as the revelation sank in. Claire wasn't just guilty of cheating once. She had cheated on me multiple times. With multiple men. Who? I finally managed to croak out. Who else? Richard hesitated again. I'm not sure of all the names, but it's definitely someone close to you. Someone you trust. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Someone I trusted? Who could it possibly be? I was about to say something when Richard cut in, his voice urgent. Mike, I think you need to know this, but I don't want to be the one to tell you who. I'm not trying to make this worse than it already is, but if you're going to do anything about it, you need to find out for yourself. I felt a chill run through me as I hung up the phone. This wasn't just about Richard and Claire anymore. There was someone else. Someone from my life. The web of lies had just expanded into territory I hadn't even imagined. I spent the next few days stewing over the information Richard had dropped. The idea that Claire had been sleeping around with multiple people made me sick to my stomach. But it also gave me something else, focus. I had a new mission. If she thought she had kept me in the dark, she was gravely mistaken. I would find out who the other person was, no matter what it took. The first place I turned to was my close circle of friends. People I'd known for years. I started asking questions, subtly at first. Nothing overt, just small inquiries, testing the waters. I didn't expect to get much, but eventually, I came across a name that made my heart stop, Greg. Greg had been a longtime friend of mine, someone I had considered a brother. We had worked together on projects, had shared countless meals, and laughed over drinks. Claire had always been friendly with him, even spent time together when I wasn't around. But now I started to piece things together. Claire's frequent trips to visit family during weekends when I was away on business. Her late-night meetings that she claimed were work-related but never added up. She'd been sleeping with Greg. It hit me like a freight train. Greg. The betrayal felt like a physical blow. I'd trusted him. I had welcomed him into my home, into my life. And he had been right there, hiding in plain sight, playing the part of a friend while taking what was mine. The anger bubbled up again, and this time I didn't bother to hide it. I picked up the phone and called him. Greg, I said, my voice seething with rage. I know what you've been doing. There was a long pause on the other end, and I could practically hear him scrambling for words. Mike, he started, sounding nervous. Look, I didn't mean for this to happen. Claire, shut up, I shouted. You didn't mean for this to happen? You're telling me you didn't plan this? You've been lying to me for months, and you think I'm going to buy some half-hearted excuse? Greg was silent. He knew he was caught. I'll deal with you later, I said, my voice cold and final. But don't bother showing up here again. Not now, not ever. The call ended with a finality that echoed in the silence that followed. I felt my heart racing, but I knew this was just the beginning. In the following days, I took everything I had learned and began to use it to further my advantage. I made sure Greg's actions weren't just a secret between us. His reputation was about to take a dive, too. The damage wasn't just about Claire anymore. It was about destroying every last person who thought they could deceive me. I wasn't going to let anyone get away with this. Not Greg, not Claire, and certainly not anyone else who had crossed the line. I reached out to a few of Greg's colleagues, people who wouldn't hesitate to leak a scandal, and made sure the details of his affair with Claire became public knowledge. His career, like hers, would begin to crumble piece by piece. He'd lost my trust, but now he was going to lose his career. I wasn't going to leave anything to chance. As for Claire, I had already taken everything she valued, her gallery, her reputation, her finances. But I couldn't let her off that easily. I made sure she would never forget me. I filed the divorce papers, and then, just as I was about to sign, I included something extra. A clause that would ensure she would be financially responsible for her own mess. I wanted her to feel the full weight of her actions, not just emotionally, but financially as well. The day I signed the final paperwork, I felt an overwhelming sense of closure. I wasn't just walking away from a marriage. I was walking away from a lifetime of lies, deceit, and pain. And though I didn't have the answers to every question, one thing was clear. I was free. The weeks following the final dissolution of my marriage to Claire were a blur of quiet satisfaction and uneasy introspection. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was just drifting through life. I wasn't the passive observer I used to be, the man who kept quiet and allowed the world to make decisions for him. Now every step I took was deliberate. Every action had a purpose. I'd taken back control, and I wasn't about to let go of it. But even with that sense of power came a gnawing emptiness. I had exacted my revenge, dismantled Claire's life, and ensured she wouldn't be walking away from this mess unscathed. I had destroyed her reputation in the art world, severed her connections, and made her pay for everything she had done. But there was something about it that still felt hollow. I had crossed lines, and as much as I told myself it was justified, part of me started to wonder if this was really the victory I had imagined. It all came to a head one morning, a few weeks after the divorce was finalized. I was sitting at the kitchen table, sipping my coffee, when I heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. At first, I didn't think anything of it, but when I saw Claire's car in front of the house, I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. She hadn't contacted me since the final divorce papers were signed, and after everything that had transpired, I didn't expect her to show up uninvited. But there she was. It wasn't her presence that threw me off. It was the quiet, almost vulnerable look in her eyes as she stepped out of the car. She wasn't the same confident, manipulative woman who had stood before me months ago. She was broken. I stood up and made my way to the door. As I opened it, I saw her standing on the porch, her eyes red and swollen, as if she hadn't been sleeping. She wasn't here for a fight this time. It was clear she was already fighting her own demons. "Mike," she said softly, as though speaking any louder would make the situation worse. "I need to talk." I didn't let her in immediately. I had no idea what she could possibly say now. "What more is there to say, Claire?" I asked, my voice calm but hard. She took a deep breath before speaking again. "I know you hate me. I know you've done everything you could to make me pay. But I'm here because I owe you the truth. I need to tell you something you don't know." My gut tightened. This wasn't like the usual manipulative Claire. This was different. She wasn't trying to manipulate me anymore. There was no deflection, no blame being shifted. Just a hollow honesty that I wasn't sure I was ready for. "I've done terrible things, Mike," she continued, her voice cracking. "And the worst thing I've done is that I never truly loved you." I stared at her, processing her words. They hit me like a ton of bricks, but not in the way I had expected. This wasn't some grand, emotional revelation. It wasn't some admission of guilt I had been hoping for, hoping to see her finally realize the depth of her betrayal. No, it was something else. "I knew that," I said, cutting her off. I didn't feel pity. I didn't feel anger. It was just a quiet, resigned understanding. "I've known that for a long time, Claire." Her eyes flickered, and she looked away for a moment, almost as if she was ashamed to meet my gaze. But when she spoke again, it was like the weight of the world had lifted off her shoulders. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "But I want you to know, I've learned something in all this. I've realized that I never understood what it meant to truly care about someone. I used people to fill the emptiness inside me, and I took you for granted. I ruined everything we had, and now I'm paying the price for it. Her words hung in the air for a long moment. I hadn't been expecting this conversation. I had expected her to be angry, to try to manipulate me one last time, but what she was saying now felt like sincerity. It wasn't enough to change anything, but it felt real in a way I hadn't thought possible. "I'm not here to ask for your forgiveness," Claire said, wiping her eyes. "I just wanted you to know the truth. That's all I can offer now." I didn't answer immediately. The silence stretched between us, but it didn't feel as heavy as it had before. I could have said something, could have reminded her of everything she had done to me, but instead, I just nodded. "You've got that, Claire. The truth." She looked at me one last time, a look of quiet resignation on her face, then turned and walked away without another word. I didn't call after her. I didn't ask her to stay. She had made her bed, and now she was laying in it. I had nothing more to say. As I watched her leave, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't relief, not exactly. It wasn't even closure, because I wasn't sure if that was something I would ever fully have. It was just finality. There were no more questions left to ask, no more decisions to make. Everything that had needed to happen had happened, and I was no longer trapped by the past. I could walk away, but there was one last piece I had to deal with. Greg. After everything that had transpired with Claire, I wasn't going to let Greg walk away from this unscathed. I didn't care what had happened between them or why. What mattered was the betrayal. He had crossed a line, and it was time he paid for it too. I knew where he liked to go after work, some bar down the street from his office, a place where he thought he could be anonymous. The kind of place where people went to forget, to drown out their own guilt. But I wasn't going to let Greg forget what he had done. That night, I showed up at the bar. I wasn't looking for a confrontation. I wasn't even looking for a fight. What I wanted was to make sure that he knew. He had to know that there was no escaping the consequences of his actions. I walked up to the bar, ordered a drink, and waited. It didn't take long before I saw him come through the door. He didn't see me at first, but I could tell he was on edge. He walked to the counter and ordered as usual, whiskey on the rocks. I waited until he took his first sip, and then I slid into the seat next to him. When he saw me, his face went pale. He knew why I was there. He knew what had been done. "Mike, look," he started, but I cut him off. "You're going to pay for this, Greg. I'm not going to let you pretend it didn't happen." "I didn't mean for it to go this far," he said, trying to play the victim. "But I wasn't buying it. No one asked you to be a part of this," I said quietly. "You made your choice. And now, you'll face the consequences. Just like she is." His eyes darted around the bar, clearly uncomfortable. But I wasn't done with him yet. "You're done, Greg. Your career, your reputation, it's all about to fall apart. You've got no one to blame but yourself." I didn't wait for a response. I stood up, paid for my drink, and left. But as I walked out of that bar, I couldn't help but feel a strange satisfaction. I had done everything I could. Claire's lies had been exposed, and her reputation was shattered. Greg's future was uncertain, and his betrayal would haunt him forever. And as for me, I was free. I had nothing left to prove to anyone.